I remember back when Pierre Poilievre first became the federal Conservative Party leader, there were liberal talking heads all over the mainstream media claiming that Canadians don't like him and he's too extreme, and they would cite polls to show you that Pierre Poilievre was actually a very bad Conservative Party leader, even though he'd only been leader for like a couple of months by the point they started harping on him, and obviously not enough people even knew who he was to decide whether or not they liked him or not. You'll get a lot of liberals when a conservative first becomes the leader of the party that just default hate them because they're the conservative, but people in the middle will take a lot longer to decide whether or not they like them or not. These days, Poilievre has a very good approval rating, and he's not just leading the conservatives by 1 or 2 points. Back when he was first leader, it would kind of shuffle back and forth between whether the liberals were up by a bit or the conservatives were up by a bit. And now the conservatives are leading by like an average of 20 points in most polls that are not conducted by Frank Graves. And now suddenly all of these same liberal talking heads from these mainstream media shows are saying polls don't matter. Polls don't matter. Actually, Justin Trudeau is going to win Canadians back over with his commitment to principle on the carbon tax. Absolute laugh, considering the carbon tax is probably one of the top 3 reasons that people don't like Justin Trudeau anymore. And I think a great example of this is Greg MacEachern on, I don't know, the CBC show Power and Politics. That might be a CTV show. I don't really keep up too much with what's going on with CBC. This is also a show that about a year ago, I think I cited as one of the dullest shows I've ever seen in my entire life. There are 3 consultants here talking about politics, and none of them can ever have really strong opinions on anything because they either work for a strategy organization or they work for a party and can only read talking points. You have Fred Delory here representing the Conservatives, the worst Conservative campaign manager since Jenny Byrne to be leading a national campaign. He was the one that was leading O'Toole's campaign. Jenny Byrne was the one who was leading the bad 2015 campaign. But, what can you do? But I want to get to Greg MacEachern's comments right here, because he's so delusional that in trying to defend Justin Trudeau and say the polls don't matter, he actually proves just how bad of a position Justin Trudeau is in. Take a look at this.
Greg, it feels like they must have something. They've done 4 or 5 confidence motions now, right, to try to have an election. You must have a platform ready to go, right? Or is this just theater?
It may be theater. I mean, I do believe that the Conservatives have been very dependent, and their confidence is very much based on polling. And we've seen in the United States that events can change the dynamic really, really quickly. When I was in Nova Scotia,
the funny thing is he says that saying, oh, they rely so much on polling, but down south we've seen that events can shift things quite fast. I'm like, yes. And do you know how we indicate whether or not events have shifted things? Through polling. Yes, not all polls are accurate, but polling tends to be better than guessing overall, unless you're like really in touch with the community. Plus also, by the way, Kamala Harris is actually still losing to Donald Trump in the U.S., especially in the Electoral College. The most accurate pollster actually still has Trump up 2 points on her. So yeah, polling is decently accurate. Polling is a reliable tool, but Greg MacEachern here likes to kind of, care about polling when it suits him, because he was one of the original people saying that Poilievre was going to have a hard time getting moderates to vote for him. And lo and behold, now the Conservatives are having polls where they're winning 45, 46% of the national Canadian electorate. That's not a region where they're doing well. That's the country that they're doing well in.
Scotia a couple of times, the dynamic really, really quickly. When I was in Nova Scotia a couple of times over the summer, I had a lot of people come up to me and say, Greg, your guy has to go, but boy, I don't like that other guy. And I think from what I'm told of, the people who work in the focus group world in Canada, they hear the same thing. And we've seen some polling that have said that those people who are aware of who the Conservative leader is, about half of them have some issues with him. This would be the time for perhaps the Liberals to start doing some ads. Perhaps we'll see them this fall about that.
And now, I don't think Greg here even realizes he just owned himself. So he's saying, when I travel to Nova Scotia, a default Liberal province, that presumably he's having Liberal supporters walk up to him and say, Greg, I think your guy needs to step down, but I still don't like Pierre Poilievre, because who's going to recognize Greg MacEachern other than default liberals? Does he have a lot of hardcore conservative friends? I really doubt it, because obviously hardcore conservatives like Poilievre. Just look at the polling. And I know Greg MacEachern saying the polls don't matter, but I don't believe him. I actually think, he might be lying here. He's just saying whatever he can to get himself through this TV segment and not completely embarrass himself. But he embarrassed himself anyways. So he has a partisan liberal walk up to him, say, Greg, I think that your guy needs to step down, but I still don't like Poilievre. And it's like, okay, so Greg is admitting that even like liberal supporters, the 23% of people still voting liberal, still saying they're going to vote liberal, don't even like the leader running the party. That's terrifying. That's horrible. Like, maybe this guy is like a soft conservative now, but he doesn't like Poilievre, and maybe the liberals can win him back. I really doubt it. I think Greg is like proving too much through his story. He is proving that the liberal hardcores don't like Justin Trudeau. And he's acting like, well, they don't like Poilievre, so we have an angle here. I'm like, an angle with a voter you should already have. That's the problem. The issue is that, the enemy is kind of in the gates right now. We see this in Montreal. Yeah, the Conservatives are definitely not going to win the by-election in La Salle-Amard-Verdun. But the fact that it's even up for grabs for the Bloc Québécois and the NDP means that the Liberals have a lot of issues with their own people potentially going Bloc in Quebec or going NDP in other regions if they're not willing to go Conservative. And most of them seem to have been willing to go Conservative. Poilievre, as much as he wants to say that, people don't really like him, the approval rating charts show that he's the only leader right now who has a solid approval rating. Like, I don't know what Blanchette's approval rating is in Quebec. I don't doubt it's probably decent because he gets to play to a very specific niche audience. But the point still stands. Out of all the actual real national leaders, the only one who people actually like more than they dislike is Pierre Poilievre. Also, here's another thing with the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party is not a personality-based party. People really like Pierre Poilievre. He has a much bigger personality compared to previous Conservative leaders. But the great thing with the Conservative Party is that we've never been I don't want to be too harsh here because I don't like overheated rhetoric. But we're not a cult-like party where you have to like Justin Trudeau to vote for them. That's the big problem for the Liberals. If you don't like Justin Trudeau, as I've repeated so many times in the past, if you don't like him, you're not even thinking about voting Liberal. There's a reason why in this last approval rating poll that Abacus Data did, that Justin Trudeau has a 22% approval rating. Do you know what the Liberals got in that national poll? 23%. The Liberals polling is always tightly packed around what Justin Trudeau's approval rating is. Pierre Poilievre has an approval rating of like 39% or so, but his party's polling at 45%. You don't have to love Poilievre to say, yeah, I think the carbon tax is stupid. Yeah, overall taxation needs to go down. Regulation is too much. Immigration's too high. We shouldn't go after law-abiding gun owners. You can have very diverse opinions within the Conservative Party. You can be a little bit more on the Red Tory side. You can be on the SOCON side like I am. I'm a social conservative. And you can exist in the party and you can like or dislike the leader, but still generally like the policy agenda. The problem with the Liberals is that all of it is contained within the personality of Justin Trudeau. Even the NDP, as crappy of a leader Jagmeet Singh is, there are wings to the party so that you cannot like the direction that Singh is exactly going in, but you can generally still vote for the package of policies that the NDP represents. This is the issue with Justin Trudeau's leadership. He's made the party so much about him that the party doesn't know what to do once he is their least profitable asset. He's their only asset. That's the big issue here. And Greg MacEachern, to get back to him, he is like the most obnoxious person I've ever seen on Twitter. But other than, just aside from that, maybe it's that insulting people wasn't a good strategy, because Greg's saying that the Liberals just need to get on the horse and start running ads and going after Pierre Poilievre directly. It's like, guys, if you think that this is going to be a personality election, you're sorely mistaken. It's like in British Columbia right now. David Eby, the BC NDP premier, is falling all over himself. He is absolutely fumbling and flip-flopping on all of his policies because he tried the Conservatives are extreme angle. And one, it's not accurate. And two, people said, I don't care. I can't afford groceries. I can't afford rent. And you're attacking John Rusted and the BC Conservatives because he doesn't think we're going to be underwater in 10 years. He's not a climate alarmist. Good. Good. He cares about the issues I care about. And so now David Eby's trying to pivot on every single one of his policies because he's realizing it's a policy-based election. People in a referendum-style election, like it's happening right now, people don't like the current government and they want the opposite. So now David Eby's trying to change himself as much as possible in these last 38 days before the election in order to pretend like he might have a clue about what residents want. I don't think it's going to work, but that's what we're dealing with right now. And since I'm rambling here, and I assume a lot of softer viewers of the show who just want the headline points I'm making probably have already clicked off here, I just wanted to bring up this one thing that happened today. Maybe this seems very random, but I just wanted to talk about the lying with statistics, because this happened and it doesn't deserve its own video, but just bumped into a leftist on Twitter today who made this claim, and I want to find it right here. It might be a little bit difficult for me to find, but these people who are talking about how because David Eby today has flip-flopped now in favor of involuntary care treatment for drug addicts, and he's one of these leftists who's now like, oh, this is a mistake because involuntary care is very bad. He posted this, and it shows why so many people, younger people, vote left. It's because they don't understand real life very well. And it's not an age thing. You can be 15 and you could be very knowledgeable and have a common sense sort of wisdom. But this is why so many people who are young vote NDP still. It's because they don't know what real life is like. So he posted this to me in response to me saying that involuntary care is a good policy, but the way David Eby's serving it up, even he's not really proposing a good version of it. He's basically saying once you're fully cooked, once you actually are so damaged by illicit drugs, the government will take you into involuntary care, which is the dumbest way of doing it possible. You should be taking people in as soon as they are so addicted that they can't follow basic laws. If you're camping on the side of the street, you should be basically forced into involuntary care because this person is not even capable of following the law anymore, because you couldn't say, can you move your stuff over there? They can't do it unless you force them to do it. But this person then claims the mortality rate was estimated as 4.4 times higher than the general population. And he's talking about 4 years after you exit involuntary care, you are 4.4 times more likely to die than members of the general public in your same age demographic. So people in their 40s are very unlikely to die from natural causes. But those who are in their 40s who have just left involuntary treatment for drug addiction are 4.4 times higher, more likely to die than people in that age bracket. And I'm thinking, yeah, because they, used to smoke crack for years and years. It might not be because the involuntary treatment is hurting them. I feel like I'm going into a Norm Macdonald bit here. It's I didn't think the involuntary treatment was bad. I thought the, smoking meth and injecting heroin between your toes was the real tragedy here, not the, forcing people to take a needle out of their arm or whatever. I'd love if I could do better impressions, but this is an actual thing. And this went on for a while, this argument with this person earlier today, where they're they're not understanding that, yes, when you've made bad choices, like injecting smack into your eye, and I'm being hyperbolic for fun, obviously you're going to have a higher mortality rate even after you get off drugs. What do you think the mortality rate is between the people who stayed on the street using heavy illicit opioids and the people who then took involuntary treatment and left it and then maybe or maybe not perished because they had severe damage to their heart or lungs or kidneys or liver? That's the big issue here. Were they better off than staying on the street or going through involuntary treatment? But you have this constantly from people on the left who don't know how real life works, so they cite you their study that shows that whatever you believe in is actually bad. It's like when people come up to you online, people who I would describe as terminally online. If you've never heard the term, it's just describing somebody who spends so much time online, who is just so online that they don't know really almost how to like navigate real life anymore. That online is all that matters. It's like people who think that online political debates are the end all be all when most normal middle class people could care less about the stupid culture war happening on X or Facebook. But you'll have these people who are like, incarcerating criminals is bad, or it doesn't work because after they leave prison, they're still this percentage likely to recidivize and they're going to commit another crime. And it's like, yeah, they're criminals. They've already self-selected themselves as willing to commit illicit acts. So it shouldn't be that surprising that after they leave prison, they are still somebody who is likely in some cases to commit a crime. The good thing is that those who leave are less likely to commit crimes than those who have not been arrested before who are currently committing crimes. That is the actual thing here. You have so many socialists who pretend that because your program doesn't result in perfection, then why try in the first place? Why try? Because it's better than not trying, and it leads to better results. Perfect results? Not on this earth, but what it is better. And, it's insane that I have to actually explain this to people. At one point, the guy I was arguing with actually said that, well, you find me the statistics that prove involuntary treatment works, but I'm just going to assume I'm right for now. I'm like, wow, that's a wise phrase to use. I'm just going to assume I'm right. Don't do that. The funny thing is that they're like, oh, you didn't read the study fully. I don't need to read your study. The top line result doesn't make sense for real life. Yeah, 4.4 times more likely to die, or have a higher 4 times higher mortality rate than the general public. Thank God it's not higher after they leave involuntary care. That actually seems to be a pretty good statistic because people in their 30s and 40s are very unlikely to die during those years of their life from natural causes. And 4.4 times higher is actually not that much of a chance of dying. Better than injecting, like fentanyl-laced like meth into your system. Whatever. Anyways, this has gone rambly enough. So anyways, if you want to support this show, you guys can go to the description and click on the Give, Send, Go link. Throw me $20 or whatever you want. Don't do it if you don't have the money. But we have this billionaire from China suing us. He's a big developer in China and Canada, and he's suing us for defamation because, like, in 2020, it's been a while, we had a guest writer write an article about him, not even about him, about Aaron O'Toole taking money from billionaires who were connected with the CCP. And we cited, when we mentioned this guy, a Globe and Mail article that was written a year and a half before we had even published our article mentioning him, and it was all about all of his CCP connections. He literally sat on an advisory board to the Chinese People's Congress, but it was rude for us to even mention that the Globe and Mail had uncovered this a long time before. But he didn't want to sue the Globe and Mail, or at least we have no evidence he tried to sue the Globe and Mail, even though we requested it, I believe, almost a year ago. He still hasn't been able to show us he even did anything to the Globe and Mail. But because he was too scared to sue them, he's suing us instead. And he wasn't expecting that we were actually going to fight back. So $32,000 later, we're still fighting it out. And now, at least from my perspective, he's now running away from us because he knows that we're getting towards the point where I could probably file for summary judgment or something like that, and I'd probably win. I actually believe that if I win, I might get double or triple my costs back because of how egregious this case was. It's how obviously frivolous it was. So if you want to contribute anything, that's the story. I don't usually tell the story because in Canada, it's buried deep enough in this video where it doesn't really matter what I say. Once, a lawyer's not going to watch hours of my content to see if I mention the guy suing me. His name's Ted Joe. But if you mention somebody, even in factual ways during a case, they'll just start filing a bunch of motions, or they'll start basically claiming that you've been malicious and you continue to defame them, even though what you're saying is entirely accurate. Even if you're trying to fundraise for your legal cost and you're having to mention the general basics of the case, they'll still try and hit you for malicious intent for even saying those things. It's absolutely ridiculous. I've seen people get messed over for even talking about their case before because the Canadian justice system is absolutely insane. But so far, the judges we've had have been very good. One of them even rewarded me $1,800 at one point because the guy wasn't even filing his evidence and it would been like 2.5 months late on it. It was crazy. Anyways, so that's it for me. I will see you guys in another video. Hopefully, I will keep it more contained. Whereas this was, I don't feel like a super substantive video, but I just wanted to talk and ramble. This is basically my radio show, so that allows me to get all my thoughts out. And, I don't want to go into real life and start rambling at people that don't know me, so at least I come here and I can ramble at you people. Have a good one.